Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. 6:01. All right, I have a couple of announcements. So first of all, I just had this up just so you know you need Replit. You'll pretty much need Replit every day, but wanted to let you know. Let's see. Okay, so I asked for a poll last week. If you weren't here, that's okay. I just wanted to get an estimate of how we thought the pacing was in the class, and just as an update, most people said that it was just right, and then a couple of people were either way too fast or too slow. If you're having issues, if it's too fast or too slow, reach out to me. I can give you help, or I can give you extra problems. No problem at all for me. And then I just also wanted to let you know the remaining sections. We are actually, halfway through. So there's not a ton left for us to cover just in this intro class. So I just wanted to give you these remaining sections we're going to go over in case you're interested. So those are going to be lists, strings, functions, files. And then the last week will probably either be review or just some extra stuff that's useful, like different libraries in Python. So yeah, we're halfway through. Can't believe it. Pretty crazy. Also, I had a request from some students asking if we could do some sort of session where we don't really talk about Python, but we talk about being autistic or neurodivergent, specifically like my personal experience, or if you guys want to all talk about like being autistic at work or hear some of my tips, I'm very happy to do that. So we're gonna have, so the last class meeting is August 4th. We'll be doing Python up until August 4th. And then the next week, I can set up some optional meetings. It'll be at the same time as class, but it'll just be optional, not part of the official program. If you wanna just come and we can talk about all of that stuff. So the plan is to talk about kind of how I was diagnosed with autism and like my experience being autistic and being a programmer, but also completely up to other topic suggestions if you want. We can have, I was thinking one meeting, but if we need to make it two, that's totally fine. So just let me know via email or Discord so I have it written down if you have other topic suggestions. But like I said, that'll be optional, just a fun post-class thing to do if you're interested. Also, just a reminder, July 4th, just talked about it, no class. And I always want to keep this up here if you need extra problems or want to watch another course that's got shorter videos or something. This is a good course to follow along with. Can't recommend it enough. They also have other coding languages on there if you're interested in learning those. All right, back to loops. So I just want to review loops. But before I review loops, does anyone have any questions from last week or just in general? All right, let me know if you do. I'm actually going to scroll to the end here. I added on some extra slides too. This is just the slides from the last class that we had. So I just added some stuff at the end so we could kind of review them before moving on to something else. So today's going to be kind of a review of loops, and then we're going to start combining loops with if statements and else statements, and we're just going to kind of work on those today to make sure that you've really got it before we move on to new content next week. Okay, so if there's no questions, I'll go ahead and start. All right, so just as a review, last class we talked about while loops and for loops, and I wanted to make this chart to kind of emphasize the differences and similarities between them. They are both types of loops, which is just a way to repeat code a certain amount of time or an indefinite amount of time, so that you're making your code more efficient and you're not like typing the same things over and over again. So we have our while loops. These loop indefinitely, whereas for loops will loop for a specific number of times. A while loop evaluates a condition that will be true or false. So like x is greater than 5, or like a string equals a certain value. It'll evaluate that condition before the loop. And then for loops will loop once for each item in a collection. So that's when we had the like I in range 0 to 5 or something. The while loop, the loop will run, it'll evaluate the condition and then go through the code and then go back up to the condition again, evaluate it again. And then the loop will stop when the condition is false. So once that condition is false, it's not going to run the loop anymore. Whereas on a for loop, It will loop through once for each item, and then the loop will end when you get to the end of your collection, which is just kind of what I'm calling the thing that the for loop is going through, iterating through. So when we say numbers in range from, when we use the range function, we say range 0, 5. It will start at 0, and then it will end before it gets to 5. So it actually won't get to that ending number, it'll end right before it. And then I just wanted to put kind of the syntax here. So we have while, and then your condition will go here, and don't forget this colon. Everything in the loop will be indented. Everything outside of the loop will be unindented. And then the for loop will be for I, it's usually for I, but it can be any variable name you want, for I in, and then whatever collection you're doing. So what we talked about before was the range function. So this is just general overview of loops. And now that we have talked about them, first of all, I'll ask if anyone has questions about loops, if you want some clarification on something, and then we're going to get into some examples on asking when you should use a while loop and when you should use a for loop. So are there any questions? I'm going to drink some water. Yeah, Anthony.
What's the difference between while?
I think you cut off there. Can you say your question again?
What's the difference between while loops and for loops?
So just in general, a while loop, let me find the specific slide on it. Let's see. A while loop will kind of look like this. It'll say while, and then there's a condition. It'll evaluate this condition. That's when the while loop will run. Whereas a for loop looks like this, and it runs for each item in the collection. So going back to our chart here, while loops loop indefinitely. They just loop based off of the condition, whereas for loops will loop for a specific number of times based on items in a collection. So usually just a range of numbers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Any others? And this is not the end of loops. We're going to talk more about them. So we're going to get more practice with them. So if it's still a bit weird, trying to determine the difference between them, that's totally fine. Okay, so I have some questions here, and I wanted to ask, which do you think would be better to use, a while loop or a for loop? And we're going to go through these one at a time. If you have the slides, the answers will be on later slides. So if you're not confident in your answer, you could look, or you could just commit to not look ahead. But I do have these little questions for us. So the first one is, continue to ask a user for input until the input is correctly entered. So go ahead and put in the chat or the Discord whether you think this should be a while loop or a for loop. All right, we've got some votes coming in. Yeah, so I'm seeing a couple while loop answers here, and yeah, that is correct. So this will be a while loop, and the reason it's a while loop is because you're asking the user for input until the input is correct. So you will have probably a while statement that says like while input does not equal whatever you want it to be, that would be valid. You'll probably have that in your while loop, and then continue to ask the user for that input until they put in something correct. And another way you can tell that this is a while loop is because it's not a certain number of times. Like there's not a certain number of times you're asking the user for something. You're saying until the input is correct. And that's not like something you could put a number on, because you don't know how many times someone's going to mess up. You just got to wait for that. So if any of these, you're like, hey, I think maybe this could be a different kind of loop, or you don't exactly understand the explanation that I gave, just go ahead, raise your hand or something, and we'll keep going through these. But yeah, you guys are doing great. Okay, so the next one is perform math on a variable until that variable is greater than a certain value. While loop or for loop? All right, yeah, it looks like our answers are slowing down. Yeah, so a lot of you said while, and that would be correct. So the reason that this one is a while loop, we're performing math on a variable, and then until that variable is greater than a certain value. So greater than a certain value would be a conditional statement. So we're waiting for that condition where it's, let's say we want the number to be greater than 5, then we're waiting for that condition to be true. And once that condition is true, then we're going to stop the loop and do whatever else we wanted to do. So that one's going to be a while loop. All right, the next one, print out each character in a string. Would that be a while loop or a for loop? Okay, yeah, please don't spam the chat. But I do get what your answer was going to be. So yes, so I'm seeing a lot of for loops, and that is true. So we're saying print out each character in a string. So you're doing an action for each value in something. So printing out each character in a string, there's a specific number of characters in the string, and you're printing those out one by one. So that's performing one action, one run of the loop for each value in this string. So that's kind of like your item and condition. Item and collection. All right. Okay, so now this fourth one, and I'm seeing might be in, oh, the third one. Oh, okay, it was resolved. All right. Now the fourth one, we have repeat code until a Boolean value is true. Is that a while loop or a for loop? Yeah, great. So I'm seeing all the answers come in. You guys are getting faster and faster. Yeah, so you guys are exactly right. This is a while loop. So this doesn't have to be, we've been dealing with a lot of numbers and strings, but don't forget about our Booleans. We love our Booleans. These are just true or false. And so we could have some Boolean value and say it equals false. And we want to say while false or something. We want to repeat the code until the Boolean value is evaluated to true. And so of course something will have to change. Something inside our code will have to make that eventually change to true, but our while loop will run until a value is true for this example. And finally, the last one, perform a mathematical operation on a set of numbers. Yeah, great. So thank you all for your answers. You guys are exactly right. So that will be a for loop, and that is because we're doing it. The keyword here is on a set of numbers. So that is a finite set. And you want to perform one mathematical operation for each number in that set of numbers. So yeah, it looks like you guys have really got the hang of gotten a hold of the difference between while loops and for loops, and then maybe when you want to use one or the other. There are some places where you could feasibly use either one, but just these general things are good to look out for, making sure that you know if I give you a problem and you know you need a loop, you want to be able to think like, okay, do I need to use a while loop for this or a for loop? So, all right, any questions on any of these? I used to have a professor who would ask questions to the class, and then just like he had tea, and he would sip his tea and stare at his camera while he waited for us to answer. It was really awkward, but I guess effective because we all got intimidated and had to answer. But if you don't have questions, that is totally fine. All right. So now I wanted to kind of review loops by looking at code and saying, what do you think is going to happen? So I've got this code here that I wrote in Replit, and we'll actually test this out to make sure that our answer is correct. Because that's a great thing about coding, is if you're not sure what will happen in code, you can always run it and find out. So do we have any guesses? We have this x equals 0, while x is greater than 0, print x. And then, oh, I have this here. It says x plus equals 1. This is just an abbreviated way of saying x equals x plus 1. You can do this with most operations. You can do x plus equals, x minus equals. That would be x equals x minus 1. You might see this, so I wanted to make sure and include that. It's a pretty nice abbreviation. But anyway, we've got this code. What is going to happen? I'll exit here so I can go ahead and open Replit when we're ready. Okay, so we've got a couple guesses on what will happen. We've got a variety of guesses, and that's good. That means we've got some discussion to go on. So I'm going to type this out. Go ahead and keep thinking. That is not what I wanted. I'm going to see. So, all right, we have x equals 0, and I'm going to say while x is greater than 0. All right, so I'm looking at, okay, so we've got a couple guesses. I'll go ahead and run it. Run. Nothing happens. So the reason for this, we've got x equals 0, and then this while loop, it may be tempting to see some code and be like, oh yes, that code needs to run because we wrote it. But the condition here is x is greater than 0, and 0 is not greater than 0. 0 is 0, so this condition will be false, and none of this will run, and then it will end because we don't have any lines after that saying what to do. So a little bit of a trick question, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew that while loops don't have to run at all. So if this condition is always, like if it starts out false, it just won't run. So now I have a variation on that in this next one with kind of the same thing, but this time it says x equals 9. Now it says while x is less than 10, print x is less than 10, and then outside the loop we have print the loop has ended. So what will be the result of this if we ran it? Any guesses? Yeah, we've got a line 5 forever. Okay, just giving you guys some time to put in your answers. All right, let's test it out. So now I have, oops, I keep going to the wrong one. Now I have x equals 9. Now the condition is while x is less than 10. And we want to say print. Okay, so let's see what happens. Ah! Sorry, that was loud. It's infinite. It's an infinite loop. And the reason for this is that we never update x. So it says while x is less than 10. So this loop is going to run while x is less than 10. So x is equal to 9. And now we're going to print x is less than 10. It's going to go back up to this and say, all right, we're going to reevaluate. Is x still less than 10? It is, because we never changed it. And it'll just print x is less than 10. And it would keep doing this forever until the computer died, unless we stopped it. So it actually never gets to this other one where it says the loop has ended, because the loop never ends. It's an infinite loop. All right, so any questions about those two? I think we have one more example with the loops, this time a for loop example. So if there are questions, let me know. And then if you want to go ahead and look at the example, we have this one, and let me know what you think is going to happen. This is something that we may have not really done before with adding strings. We talked about adding strings, but I just want to see if you guys will be able to figure out what is going to happen in this script here. I think you know, go ahead and put your guess in the chat. Or if you just want to put a guess in the chat, even if it's wrong, totally good. Sometimes you will come across scripts that you're like, I haven't seen someone do that strategy before. But it's good to be able to read it over and think about what you think that what you think could be going on. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing most of the answers come in. And yes, so it's going to print hello backwards, ole, as someone typed in the chat. So I do see a couple people saying that it'll print these little things here. This here is just an empty string. So it is a string, it has quotes around it, but Python doesn't ever print these quotes. It just treats that as a string that is empty. So you can actually add strings together and you can add empty strings. And it just means that the string, basically if you say like H plus empty string, it'll just be H. But you're able, I'll go through why I made the empty string. But first of all, I'm going to type it out so we can see exactly what it does. So I'm going to say word hello. And now backwards. So I want to, this is called initializing, when you don't use a variable quite yet, but you need to set it to a value. Now I'm going to say for letter in word. So this is just like, usually we see I, so sometimes it'll be for I in something. This is just a variable that you make up right there. It's not a variable that you used. So you don't have to define it beforehand. In the for loop, it's just a placeholder basically. So you can name it whatever you want. And for clarity, I like to name it letter so that we know what we're dealing with. I'm going to say for letter in word, and I'm going to say backwards equals letter plus backwards. And this is another good thing about knowing how to name your variables, because you probably can kind of guess what's happening because of this word backwards here. And of course, you could just be mean and name your variable that, and backwards have nothing to do with it, but it is good practice to give your variables meaningful names. So we have, yeah, letter plus backwards, and then at the end of the word, at the end of the loop, print backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it says ole, it's hello backwards. So this is a cool way to reverse words if you're interested in that, if you want cool little word puzzle things. But so I'm just going to walk you through what we did here. So we defined word to equal hello, this is a string. Backwards is empty string. That's basically just because I needed to have a starting string to be able to add each letter. So now we're going to say for letter in word, which our word is hello. Backwards, we're going to reassign it, equals letter, which it's going to go through each letter. So the first one's going to be H plus backwards, which right now backwards is this empty string. So I'm going to put down here what each run of the loop is going to be. So the letter is going to be H. So it's going to be backwards equals H plus empty string. That should be lowercase h. Now we're going to say backwards equals E plus H. And the addition with strings, it'll just squash them together like we talked about way back when in one of the first lessons. Now backwards equals L plus HE. Oh no, EH. It's hard to think backwards. EH. And it'll go on like that until you get backwards equals ole. Okay, are there any questions on this one? It was kind of a trick one. Julian, I think your profile is lighting up like you're talking, but I can't hear you if you are talking. Why did it add to the left and not to the right of the H? So the reason is all to the order that you put it. So with strings, when you add them, it's just going to add them in the order that you put them in. So it's just going to squash them together, called concatenation. So we have H plus, or here, let's look, E plus H will end up being EH. Same thing with L plus EH will be LEH. So if you had it the other way around, then it would just add it to the end. But in this case, I had it add the letter at the beginning, so it would add it at the beginning. Does that make sense? It's really just the order that you put it in. Yeah. How did the letter function work without being defined beforehand? Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's not really a function, it's just part of the for loop. So in for loops, the basic structure is like we usually say for I in, and then like, you know, some collection here. So in this case, we could have said for I in word. And this I here, you don't really define, it's just part of the for loop. You're saying for some arbitrary variable in this collection. And then this I is actually going to equal whatever is each item in the collection. So when we say, and we can name it whatever we want. So in this case, I named it letter. And you say for letter in word. So this first iteration, letter will be, it will go through each letter in hello. And so the first iteration letter is going to equal H. The second iteration letter is going to equal E, and so on like that. So this is just a dummy variable that you name, and then it equals each item in the collection as it goes through the loop. So it's treating the string like an array. Yeah, so with for loops in Python, you can iterate through strings. Yeah, kind of like an array. But we haven't talked about arrays yet, but yes. So just like you can go through a list of letters or a list of numbers or something, you can actually just go through literal strings and it'll just split them apart by character. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah, good questions, good questions. Okay, so those are the review slides that I had for loops, and now we're going to try to combine those with conditionals. So let me go back here. Yep. Okay, we already went through these. Loops review. Okay. So I think I might just keep it in this view so that I don't have to keep switching between this and Replit all the time. But so more logic structures. So a couple of weeks ago when we talked about if and else and elif statements, we talked about logic structure, which is when you're determining what pieces of code will run, kind of like what we just did with loops. And so previously we did these exercises with if, elif, and else statements, but now we have a new ingredient to add to our little coding soup, and we can start messing around with those. So we're going to start going through some programs with loops and if statements and see what will happen. And what code will actually run. So this first one that I have, what will this end up printing? I should say that. What will this print? And just another good hint is that if you're not sure or you get stuck, you can always run this and see for yourself. All right, got some guesses in. Sorry, I left it because I'm trying to get back to that. Okay, so we can erase this. Ignore that. Okay. All right, here it is again. Oh, nope, wrong one. Sorry. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this and be thinking about what you think it is. Times. Okay, so x equals 3. Well, x mod 2 is not equal 0. x equals x plus 2. And x. X. Okay, so that should be what we have up here. All right, we've got our guesses in. Okay, so I'm going to run this. Let's see what the answer is. So there we go. So it will print several things. Yep, there we go. So 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 14. So let's go through this one line by line. So first we have x equals 3. And now we're saying while x mod 2, x modulo 2 is not equal to 0. So basically while this is an odd number, reassign x, we're going to say x equals x plus 2. So now x is going to be 5 on this first iteration. Print x. So this will print 5, which is exactly what we have here. If x is greater than 11, it's not on this first iteration. So x is equal to 5, and now this while condition is while x is an odd number, basically is what this means, which it is. So this will run. Now x equals x plus 2. So now x equals 7. Print x. It prints 7. And it's going to continue to do this for 5. So we just did it on 7. So it'll do 9, 11, 13. And then it'll get to this if x is greater than 11. When x is equal to 13, it will finally be greater than 11. And it will run this where x equals x plus 1, making it 14. And now we'll go back up to the while loop where it says, is x an odd number? It's equal to 14 now. So it's not, so we're going to exit the loop and print x. Okay, I thought that the statement is false. Which statement are you talking about? Sorry, I said it like that because I was looking at my code and trying to read at the same time. Okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
Miranda, I'm sorry. I'm thinking the whole thing because, yeah, I'm just like, I think I'm just not understanding the symbols like for the percentage and the exclamation point. So I think I got confused on those.
Oh yeah, that's okay. So this is, you can say it like x modulo 2 or x mod 2. That is the modulo operator. And that is basically looking at if you were to divide x by 2, would it be a whole number or not? And if it's a whole number, then the remainder would be 0. But if it's not a whole number, if it's not evenly divisible by 2, so if it's an odd number, then you would have some remainder left over after dividing by 2. So this basically just means if x is an odd number. And
It'll be
so
1.5. Oops, sorry.
what?
Would it be 1.5, like 3 divided by 2? Wait a
Well,
minute.
so this isn't 3 divided by 2, it's 3 modulo 2. So you're saying if you when you divide 3 by 2, the answer, like 3 modulo 2, the answer is not 3 divided by 2, it's what's left over when you divide 3 by 2. So so it would be, sorry, I'm just getting all my words mixed up. So it's not going to divide evenly by 2. That's basically just what this means. The percent sign means does it divide evenly by, if it's 0, it does. If it's any other number, it doesn't. It's like remainder.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. It's not the most that you'll see this is when you're asking if a number is even. So if something mod 2 is not 0, then it's odd. If something mod 2 is 0, then it's even. But I would just if you need more practice with modulo, I would just Google modulo and there'll probably be a ton of examples. But if you get stuck on that, it's not a huge deal as long as you remember when you write it down or something.
All right. Thank you so much, Miranda.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Preston, see you. Have a good weekend. Okay, so so we went through this. So the answer is 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 14. That is what it prints because of all of these conditions. Does anyone have questions about how this worked? If not, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, I'll go ahead. What about in this next one? What will this print? So I'm going to type this out. So we have for I in range 0 to 11, print I. And then inside that loop, we have if, is that I mod 2? Yeah. So if I modulo 2 equals 0, and I divided by 2. Okay, what will happen with this? Any guesses? Okay, so we've got a couple guesses. So let's go ahead and talk through this one. So we've got for I in range 0 to 11. So this is going to start at 0, and then it's going to stop actually at 10. It'll stop after it does 10. Just because of how the range function works, it'll stop before this ending number. Print I. So first we're going to go through the first iteration. We're going to go through and I will be equal to 0. So we're going to print I. So we're going to print 0. Now, if I mod 2 is equal to 0, then print I divided by 2. 0 mod 2 is 0. So it'll print 0 again. Now we're going to go back up, evaluate this loop again. The next number is 1. We're going to print 1. If 1 modulo 2 is 0, which it's not, so this is going to be false, it's not going to run, and it's going to go so on like that. So let's go ahead and run this to see exactly what it does, and here we go. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 1. It's basically just printing all of the even numbers and their what it equals divided by 2, as well as the odd numbers. So 0, 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 5. So it's just this long thing of numbers. So are there any questions about how that one worked? Okie doke. We just have a couple, one more example, and then we're gonna work through some exercises together. So this one, just a little joke program. I mean, I do want you to answer it, but this is a Sesame Street reference for anyone that ever watched Sesame Street as a kid or have kids that watch Sesame Street. But so in this one, I'm asking for input, and I want you to answer what will happen if I input 0, and then what will happen if I input 5. So go ahead and let me know what you think will happen if I input 0 and then if I input 5. And that I should mean, when I say what will happen, I mean like what will a console print? Yeah, so I'm saying, yeah, putting 0 will make the code ask you to enter another number. Yeah, exactly. So if I just put 0, it'll just keep asking me to enter a positive number. If I just keep hitting 0, then we'll never get out of that. So what happens? So that's, yeah, perfectly correct. And it'll never get to this part. So then let's say that I'm in this loop and I've been hitting 0 and then I decide to hit 5. Next, what will happen? So I'll go ahead and start on this. Do I have this? I don't think so. Okay. So equals input. And I want to make sure I wrap it in int because I want it to be a number. Number equals int input. Positive number. I want to say, well, number is less than or equal to 0? Yes. Yep, yeah, Grace got it. So it will print 5. Let me count, and then count to 5. So let's go ahead and try this. So this is referencing the count in Sesame Street. Just something that amused me while I was coding. So now I'm going to say number equals int, because we need it to be a number to compare it to other numbers. Int input, enter a positive number. And then we're going to pop out of that loop once it is positive. We want to print the number, and we're going to print. And now we're, now we're going to start this for loop here for counting. So we're going to say for I in range. We want to start at 1, because typically when people count, we start at 1. So I'm going to say for I in range 1. And now what may have thrown you off here is this number plus 1. So the range function can take variables just like it can take numbers, as long as they're integers. So you can say for I in range 1, 2. Now, if we want to count up to our number, we want to say number plus 1, because then it'll actually stop before we get to number plus 1, which is at what the number equals. Don't forget our colon. Now we're going to say print. And this time we're not actually printing the number or anything. Previously, when we had a for loop, we were going to do something with each number in there. In this case, I just want to print I. And the reason that I want to do that is because I is our counter, and I just want to count up to that number. So let's see what this does when we run it. Enter a positive number. I could add some spacing there, but no, I'm going to enter. Well, first I'll enter 0 just so we can see. It'll keep asking me. Now I'm going to enter 5. And it says 5. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's just a basic counting script. So does anyone have questions on this one? I hope it was at least a little more entertaining than our like x equals 5. Print x. Try to make it a little more entertaining. Okay, so it looks like we got that one. What was the for? That's just part of, so it's the count. It's a character in Sesame Street. He says that. So does not add anything to the code specifically, just trying to quote that character. Why is it a plus and not comma? In the range function? So the range function will take, right now we're just giving it 2 arguments. So this is not, so the 1 is not the third argument. The 1 is actually just what I want the number to, what I want it to count up to. So I want it to go from 1 to our number, but it'll, if we just put one number, then it, here, I'll show you. If we just did one number, 1 to number 5, it'll stop before it gets to 5. So it'll stop at 4. But if I do number plus 1, I'm telling it to stop at number plus 1, which is 6 in this case, if we enter 5. So now if I enter 5, it counts all the way up to 5, like what we want. So if I had done a comma, like you were saying, that would be like telling it to count by 1, because this is the like count by argument. And then that would kind of be the same as the previous one, where it won't actually go up to 5. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Any other questions? Looks like you guys are really getting it.
I'm having difficulties on this.
Do
It's
you
not
have
letting me print it at all.
Not letting you print it at all? I
No.
would check for indentation errors. And that you call main.
I don't see any errors.
I guess if there's no errors, that's good. It might just mean you put the print statement in a different place. Or here, I think this is actually, no, logic example. I think you can actually see it if you click on this link. I think you can just run my code directly and see what it does. But
I'm
make sure that
reading
it's
code the same.
do you have this main thing at the end?
Yes.
Okay. It might be a spacing error. And in that case, it doesn't always return an error. Do you want to share your screen real quick? And then we're gonna work through some other examples. Or I can go through it with you at the end.
You can go through with me at the end.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll do that. So you can look at some of my examples. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, I had some other examples that I wanted to show you guys. So we are going to go through some assignments, looking at the time. Okay, so I wanted to go through this logic example here. So I was going to take a screenshot, but it took up too much of my screen. Okay, but I basically have, I'm going to walk through this with you guys, and then I want you guys to tell me what'll happen. This is just a big logic structure question. So we have two variables, x equals 5, y equals 2. Have this if statement, if x is less than 0. We have some stuff here. We have another if statement inside that says if x is greater than 0 after or greater than or equal to 0. We can do this because we could do this. We add 3 to it. So just take a look at this, and I have the link on the slides. It is this link right here. So if you click on that, you should be able to look at it yourself if you want to, but go ahead and tell me with x equals 5 and y equals 2, what will this do? So read over it, process it, type in the chat what you think this will do. What will it print? These are very much like puzzles. So if you like puzzles, I hope you enjoy these types of questions. And if you don't, I apologize. I put these in here because it's very common in coding classes to get these kinds of questions. And it's good to be able to master if statements and kind of seeing, okay, what code will run if when. All right, got a couple guesses. Cool. Okay, so we've got some guesses coming in. So just for time's sake, so that we can get to the other assignments I wanted to get through, I'll go ahead and run this. So if you notice, so this is actually named logicexample.py. So I'm going to go over to the shell. And I'm going to run it like this. Oh, it's refreshing. Oh dear. 3. I'm going to run example.py, and it says it counts down from 7. So let's go through and see why I did that. So we have x equals 5, y equals 2. We get to our first if statement. If x is less than 0, that is false. So we're not even going to look at the code inside here. We're going to go all the way down to elif x is greater than 1. That is true because x is equal to 5. We're going to say now x equals x plus y. So x equals 5 plus 2. So now it's 7. Now we say while x is greater than 0, this will evaluate to true because x is equal to 7, which is greater than 0. We're going to print x and then say x equals x minus 1. So then we're going to say x equals 7 minus 1, which is 6. We're going to evaluate this while loop again. And we're going to print x, and then we're going to keep doing this until x is not greater than 0. So in this case, once x equals 0, while x is greater than 0. Yes, okay, so it'll do it for 0 too because 0, no, never mind. It'll stop at 0, break out, and then we have this last print statement to print x. And now x equals 0 after we did all of that to our x variable. So we end up getting 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. If you have questions on this, let me know. I'm going to ask another one. What if I make it x equals -2 2. So if x equals -2, now what will it print? All right, good. Yeah, we've got some guesses here. So let's just see. Let's run this. 1, 1. Okay, so let's go through why I did this. So we have x equals -2. Now we have if x is less than 0, that is true. So we're going to go inside this if statement. Now x equals x plus 3. So -2 plus 3 is -1. Now we're going to have if x is greater than or equal to 0. And -2 plus 3 is 1. Sorry, not -1. I misspoke. Now, if x is greater than or equal to 0, which it is, we're going to say for I in range 0 to x, print x. And so it's going to start at 0. It should have printed 0. Sorry, I have confused myself. Ah. If x is less than 0, x is equal to -2. X equals -2 plus 3, which is 1. X is greater than or equal to 0. Now we'll say for I in range 0 to 1, print x. Oh, it was a trick question, and I forgot I made it a trick question. I'm saying for I in range 0 to 1, print x. X is equal to 1, so it's just going to print 1. I tricked myself on my own trick. So it's important to know how to get around those tricks. All right, so that's just kind of what I wanted you to see. Like I said, I put a link in there so you can play around with the numbers yourself. These are kind of brain twisters. As you can see, my own brain just got confused with that. But they're really good for practicing if statements and stuff. So I had some other ones. I wanted us to work on this one together. We have a little bit more time. And then I do have this task here. I'll go ahead and I'll introduce this task because I want you to work on it during this extra time that we have between next class. We have 1 week. So just work on this, see if you can do it. We're going to go over it next Thursday. But basically, I want you to create a customer service menu. And by this, I mean, like, if you've ever called a customer service phone, it's insanely frustrating. But like if you called AT&T, you would get some robot lady that says, if you want this, press 1. If you want this, press 2. If you want this, press 3. And it's very annoying, but we're going to make that where you are going to print options to the users. You're going to ask the user to select that option by entering a number or press Q to quit. If the input is wrong, so it's not a number or it's not Q, ask the user again to enter a valid option. You're going to, whatever option they choose, print some message about it. And then, so for example, if they ask for hours of operation, print that they're 8 to 5 or whatever. That's not really the important part. I just want to make sure you know how to do the structure of it. And then continue to give the user this menu until they say Q for quit. So just think about this one. We're going to work through a similar one that's a little simpler called the adding machine. So in the last couple minutes of class, we'll all work on this together, but we're going to create a program that asks the user to enter a number. Use a loop to continue asking the user for that number until they enter Q. This is very common if you're using loops to ask for user input, that they'll input, and then when they're done inputting, they can hit Q and you know that their input is done. So anyway, use the loop to continue asking the user for numbers and then print out the sum of the numbers. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So should we ask the user to input only integers? You can, but you don't have to. So if you want to ask for integers, that's perfectly fine, but you don't have to in this example. So I'm gonna open up, I think I have this started. Okay, So don't look at this. Ah, don't look at that. Okay, so first what I want to do is I want to we want to create a program that asks the user to enter a number. So we know the first thing we need to do is ask the user for that number. So let's say new number equals input, enter a number. And we also want to give them the option, we want to say, or enter Q to quit. So the idea behind this is that we want the user to continue entering numbers until they hit Q, and then we're going to present them with the sum. So we're going to say enter a number or Q to quit. And does anyone know, are we going to have a while loop or a for loop for this? So just for asking for the input, we want to keep asking them for input until they enter Q. So is that a while loop or a for loop? Yeah, so we want a while loop. So we're going to say while, we have some conditions. So we want the input. So while new number, that's our input, does not equal Q. You can put that in single quotes or double quotes, it doesn't matter. So while new number does not equal Q, we want to have some way to sum numbers. And so the reason that I chose this example is because a common thing that you'll see is called iteratively adding numbers, or an iterative sum. You'll also hear it called a running sum. This is basically just taking a number and updating it constantly by adding something to it. So what I'm going to do here is called initialization. I'm going to start out what we want. So we're going to have some sum. I'm going to start it out as 0, kind of like when I started out with an empty string before. So I'm going to call it sum numbers, and I'm going to start it out as 0. And now I want some numbers to I'm going to say plus equals. It's the same as sum numbers equals sum numbers plus int new number. So does anyone have questions so far on what I'm doing? All right, I'm going to keep going through this. If you have questions, just let me know. And now I want to update new number. So we have it up here. We needed this up here because we needed our condition. We wanted new number. If new number does not equal quit, then we want to keep going. But we have to ask the user for a number first. So first we have the input statement here. I'm going to move this a bit. Enter a number or press Q to quit. And I want to check if it's not Q. And if it's not, then this will run. We'll have some numbers equals some numbers plus int new number. Now we're wanting to update this again. So we want to say new number equals input number Q to quit. And now when we're done, we want to print the sum. So we're going to say print the sum of those numbers is, and you can have a comma and then put sum numbers. So the reason we're able to do this is because we keep updating the sum number. So we say sum numbers plus equals int new number. So we're going to keep adding whatever the user enters here. And I see that it is 7:01 on my end, so I apologize for keeping you 1 minute over. But definitely stay to ask questions if you have questions. If you have to hop off, goodbye, and I hope you have a good weekend until I see you next time. And otherwise, thanks for coming to class. Thanks for participating. I hope you guys have a great holiday. I will keep explaining this just for a little bit. All right, see you guys. Okay, so for people that are wanting to stay on, so basically just to overview what I did, I said new number equals input, enter a number or Q to quit. I need to start off with this so that I know what the user enters. Because if they enter Q right off the bat, then we're not going to do anything. I also need to initialize my sum. So I want to keep adding numbers together. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start this off at 0 so that I can add 0 to the first number. This is a common programming practice. Now I'm going to say while new number is not equal to q, so while the user has not entered q, keep asking or add the number. And then at the bottom, I'm going to say, okay, now we're going to update it. So at the bottom, we're updating our variable, enter another number or q to quit. If they haven't entered q, we're going to add it again, ask again, evaluate this. Once they enter q, we're going to break out of the loop and go down here, and it's going to print the sum of those numbers is, and we have saved some numbers as iteratively adding all of the numbers the user has entered, and this should be some numbers. So I'm going to run this so you can see what it does. So Python 3 sum.py. So if you can see here, it says enter a number or q to quit. Enter a number or q to quit. I could have spaced this out better. Sorry about that. I should have added some spaces. Okay, now I'm done. So I'm going to hit q, enter, and then it says the sum of those numbers is 26. Just adding some \ns. Okay, so are there any questions about how this worked? Clear this. So you can kind of see that better now that I added the space. Are there any questions? Michael, I see that you're unmuted and your little icon is lighting up as if you're talking, but I don't know if you're talking or not.
Probably
No.
just my type.